Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kate, and today I'm going to be talking about the books that I am planning on reading in March. I ended up doing a fun, different thing this month because last year I did a Battle of the Books, and I had a lot of fun with it. So I wanted to do that again this year, and thankfully, the reading planner that I use, which is the Always Fully Booked planner, has a 12 book Battle of the Books layout already in it, so it should make it nice and easy to add this little game in for March. When I looked at my TBR for March, before I started putting together my plan for this Battle of the Books, I realized that I had over 20 books that I wanted to get to this month. There is the slight caveat that I am not currently working because I will be starting a new job at the end of March. So I have a little bit of leeway in that I might read a little bit more than normal, but my normal max is 12 books. There's no way I'm getting to more than 20 in a month. So the 12 books for this Battle of the Books should be a pretty good measure. And then the books that are commitments for me, read-alongs, or my self-published nonfiction didn't get to, I'm going to add to the end. So I ended up with a grand total of 16 books for this month. So still pretty ambitious, but not impossible. So we'll see how it goes. I'm going to talk about my Battle of the Books picks first and kind of explain what the process on that is going to be, and then I'll get to the ones that are kind of my additional picks for the month. So the way I made my picks for this Battle of the Books is I basically pulled up a list of all of the books that I had on my original TBR, and I rolled a 20-sided die to see which ones would end up on my Battle of the Books. So that's why this is about as random as I can make it. I have 4 brackets that are each 3 books. From those 3 books, I will pick a favorite that will move to the next round. The second round has 4 books, which will narrow down to 2. And then from there, I will pick my final winner. For the first round and first bracket, book number 1 is The Vela. This is a multi-author book that is a sci-fi space opera. It was originally done via serial box, where you had multiple authors collaborating, and they were basically each writing an episode in this novel. I think they structured it kind of similar to like the way they handled TV shows. I never did the serial box subscription because I didn't really want to have to wait every week to get it, because I'm not a patient person. I like binging things. Had the completed novel on my Kindle for a little bit. I was super excited that this ended up on my list. The Vela was a collaboration between Yuha Lee, Becky Chambers, Rivers Solomon, and S.L. I think it's Wong. Sorry if I didn't pronounce that correctly. The premise for this: in the fading light of a dying star, a soldier for hire searches for a missing refugee ship and uncovers a universe-shattering secret. I actually have not read anything by any of these authors, but I love space operas, and this seemed like a really fun one to do. And it does count for the R Fantasy trans character category or prompt. So I am excited that this one made it on the list, and I will finally be getting to it in March. The second book in that bracket is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is a gothic horror that is set in Mexico. You have the main character is a young socialite whose cousin has recently married into a weird reclusive English family that lives in the Mexican countryside, and she has to go check up on her cousin who has been sending weird letters to her side of the family. So she's just checking up on her cousin, making sure that she's being treated well in her husband's family. This is very creepy. It's very strong on the vibes, very slow paced. I started it back in December and ended up setting it aside because I just wasn't in the mood for creepy books. But for whatever reason, March, I'm more okay with the creep factor, so I will be picking this one up in March. And the final book in that first bracket is The Dark Queens by Shelley Puhak. This is a narrative nonfiction, which kind of, for anybody who's not familiar with that particular genre, it is a history that straddles the line between history and historical fiction. So it's incorporating a lot of historical detail, but it is written in a more storytelling way instead of kind of more the factual way that you tend to get with history books. So it doesn't take as many liberties as historical fiction, but it's not quite standard history either. These tend to be a mixed bag for me. Sometimes they take liberties I don't particularly appreciate as someone who studied history in college, but I'm definitely curious to check this one out. The main selling point for me is that it is focused on two queens of the Merovingian time period, which is basically immediately post-Rome, early medieval, and this is kind of France and Germany before there's specific dividing lines, so it's a bunch of smaller kingdoms. But it seems like it'll be really interesting. I did start this one a little bit early because it is an e-arc that I'm a little bit behind on. It came out on February 22nd, so I want to catch up on this and kind of let people know my thoughts on it. The second bracket, the first book is Royal Assassin, which I'm very much looking forward to. This is the second book in the Farseer Trilogy. I participated in the Farseer Readalong that is being run in the Gregory LaPerch's Discord channel, which was super fun. It was great to have some, like, an emotional support group reading Assassin's Apprentice, which I loved, but definitely made me cry a lot. I was supposed to read Royal Assassin in February, but unfortunately didn't get to it, so this is a catch-up book. If I can finish Royal Assassin and have time for it, I will try and fit in Assassin's Quest, but that's 2 Hob books in 1 month. Both of them are not short, so we'll just see what happens. Book number 2 in this second bracket is The Tropic of Serpents by Marie Brennan. This is the second book in the Lady Trent series, which follows a young noblewoman, is kind of obsessed with dragons, and ends up becoming a dragon naturalist through the course of the series. It's basically her memoirs looking back on her adventures. So the first one was really fun. We are going to be doing a live show for Natural History of Dragons, the first book, on Wednesday, March 2nd. It's 7 p.m. Mountain. I'll post a link to it down below if you're curious to check that out, but I hope you will come chat with us. I am definitely looking forward to continuing in this series. I really like the main character, Isabella, and kind of the snark level of the older woman looking back at her younger, dumber self is just fun. The third book in this second bracket is First Writer's Call by Kristen Britton. This is the second book in the Green Rider series that Fine from Fine Reads is doing a read-along for. Again, this is another one I'm a little bit behind on because this was the February read, and March is High King's Tomb, I believe. So I would like to catch up on this. Green Rider I read in January and was a little bit mixed on. I'm hoping that this next book in the series will kind of sell me on the series in general. It is a classic fantasy that follows a young woman, ends up having to carry a message when she runs into the dying messenger, and gets wrapped up in some political intrigue. I'm curious to see where it goes from here. Moving to the third bracket, the first book actually ended up, so one of the slots that I had for the dice roll was a mood read, because I had 19 on there if I was excluding some of these series repeats. And so I thankfully got one of the mood read slots. So I will pick something from my physical TBR probably to read when I get to that book. The second slot in that bracket is The Inheritance of Orchidea Divina. This is a magical realism Latinx story that follows a kind of witchy matriarch figure in a family who ends up calling all of her descendants to her bedside when she's on her deathbed. And basically, she's planning on passing her gifts to them. I'm definitely really curious to check this one out. Angela from Literature Science Alliance really liked this and caught my interest in it, so I am super excited to get to it. The final book in that bracket is The Maid, which I think is by Nita Prose. And this is a mystery that follows a young hotel maid who ends up discovering a body. She, I believe, is autistic and kind of struggling to interact with other people because the family member that she used to rely on has died. I love murder mysteries, and I'm going to be buddy reading this with the channel Me, Myself, and I, so it should be really fun. The final bracket is going to start with a novella, which is Ogres by Adrian Tchaikovsky. If you've watched this channel at all, you know that I love Guns of the Dawn, and I loved Elder Race, both by Tchaikovsky. I really love Tchaikovsky's wide spread of writing, so I want to get to more of his stuff. The second book in that bracket is one that I admittedly only have on here because it was a joke, but then it got picked, and so I feel obligated. Michael Nip's Discord has a Patreon buddy read that we do every month, and I voted for A Court of Thorns and Roses because I thought it would be funny. It's been on my Kindle for a while, so since I did vote for it, I feel obligated, especially because it came up on the dice rolls. So I will be reading ACOTAR. I don't know. So this is a fantasy romance involving the Fae. That's basically the gist of what I know about it. It sounds very angsty, which is not normally my cup of tea, but like I said, I feel obligated now, so we'll see if Sarah J. Maas is for me. The final book in the final bracket is Wild and Wicked Things. This is by Francesca May. It is a historical fantasy that takes place post-World War I, where a young woman basically has to go to this mysterious island, Crow's Island, to settle her late father's estate, and ends up getting involved in this high society group where there's a dangerous type of magic and lots of intrigue. So I got this one as an e-arc from NetGalley, and I am very curious to check it out. I do love historical fantasy, and I'm particularly fascinated by kind of the post-World War I time period, so I'm very, very interested to see how this goes. So that is my list of my Battle of the Books. I will post a little graphic that has all of the book lineups, and then I will post in March how that goes. So I have a couple other books that I need to talk about. Several of these are read-alongs that I didn't make it onto the Battle of the Books, but that I definitely still feel committed to doing. The first one I will talk about is Malice by John Gwynne. This is epic fantasy. It's the first book in the Faithful of the Fallen. Well-loved series, so I imagine most people are already familiar with it. The premise is centered on Celtic history, mythology, and this big multi-POV good versus evil setup. So it sounds really interesting. The main selling point for me is that John Gwynne is a Viking reenactor, and so I'm very excited to see what he does with battles and kind of the historical detail of it. So I'm stoked to get to this one. It is a read-along being hosted by Roger over at Rogers Reads, and so like I said, stoked to get to it. Definitely going to be on my list for March. Another read-along that didn't end up in the Battle of the Books is The Daughter of the Forest. This is another Celtic mythology inspired. I believe it's based on an Irish myth of the Six Swans, where a young woman ends up being cursed by a witch, I think, where her brothers are turned into swans, and if she speaks about it, then her brothers will die. So it sounds really interesting. I have heard it's very compelling. It might be good for fans of the Winter Night Trilogy, which I am, and just finished that read along, so this is perfect timing for me. But this is being hosted by She Was Only Evie, Yolene Reads, and Sarah Reads, so I will link that down below for anybody who is interested in that. I am definitely looking forward to this. I will also reference Sarah's review of it because that's what sold me on getting to this one. I have a final bunny read to mention, which is an anthology, The Djinn Falls in Love and Other Stories. Not familiar with most of the authors in it, and it's all based around djinn, and it sounded like it would be really interesting. I am buddy reading this with a couple people over in Gregory LaPerch's Discord, so if you are curious about it and want to read it with us, please feel free to join. Final one that I will mention is I have A Cradle of Sea and Soil, which is a self-published book, which will be my self-published pick for this month. I should have read it in February, didn't get to it, by Bernie Anez Paz. This fits for our fantasy for a forest setting. The basic premise for Cradle of Sea and Soil is that it follows a mother and son duo. It is based on Caribbean island culture, and basically there's a corruption in the forest that this mother and son are trying to protect people from. So that is what I am planning on reading in March. Let me know what you're planning on reading this month. And if you have read any of the books that I mentioned here, please let me know what you thought about them. It's always good to have opinions going in. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next one.